let's get right into it. The title for today's Data Science Masterclass is really interesting. The Power of Data, Business Problem Framing Through Data Analytics with Krishna Raha. Krishna Raha, our speaker for this morning, is currently an executive manager, sales reporting and analytics at PepsiCo. She works with senior business leaders to understand business challenges and reframe them into pieces that can be solved using data and analytics. Krishna Raha has demonstrated history of working in the information technology and services industry. She is skilled in analytic skills, account management, documentation, operations management, and she's an expert at managing multiple projects on strict timelines. It's wonderful to have you here, Ms. Krishna Raha, and I'm looking forward to your masterclass today.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, or should I say a very hot welcome. It's sunny and it's hot in Bangalore. That's where I am currently, and would love to hear from people on the chat. Where are they from? What domains do they work in? Keep the session lively, right? There'll be a lot of a lot of questions that I'll have for this group. A lot of exercises that we'll do, but before I get started, brief intro about my background, my little virtual background that you can see. It's palace. It's a Dolmabahce. It's a gate of a palace called the Dolmabahce Palace from Istanbul, Turkey. So I just got back from my vacation from Istanbul, and I'm quite literally not over it yet. So I have it as my background. But a few interesting facts. The palace here was built by during the Ottoman period, 1843. It was started to build. It took about 13 years. It was built by Sultan Ahmed I, who was literally he became the king of Turkey when he was about 13 years old, and he built this palace in 20 because not everyone was taking him seriously. It took about 13 years to build this palace, like I said, but if you go inside, if you are a history buff, do read about it. But if you have visited Turkey, or if you do plan to visit, please go in here. It's beautiful. And why am I talking about this? We'll get to know a bit more in detail later. But let me quickly share my screen. So the host, if you could enable screen sharing for me.
Yes, absolutely. Also, just want to quickly tell the audience that there is a poll right there. If you would like to go ahead and just take it so that Ms. Krishna here can just get a quick gist of the audience and deliver the masterclass much better. So if you can just take the quick poll. Right. Ms. Krishna, I've given you the access to share your screen.
Great. Let me know once you can see it.
Yes, I can see it. Let me just quickly tell you the number of people we have here. We have about 61% of the people who have less than 5 years of experience, freshers. Mm-hmm. And we have about 17% people who are between 5 and 10 years of experience, 9% of people with the experience of 10 to 15 years, and 13% who says that they're longer than I care to remember. So
awesome. Love the spread. Thank you so much. So yes, start off with a quick strip. I think this draws in the essence of why we are here, right? So tell me, I mean, we have a variety of people, mix of people, and in your own experiences, have you seen this in your respective organization where we have a lot of data around us? We know or we are attending classes of, we know different techniques that are there. So there is big data analytics, there is supply chain analytics, there's regression, there's classification, there's deep learning, there's all fancy terms that's floating around. And what typically happens is, we have a lot of data, let's solve it using some of the techniques. Have you seen this in your environment? Like, let's use a classification problem, to solve any kind of scenario, or can you solve this using big data analytics? Quick responses on the chat, please.
If anybody wishes to speak, then maybe you can just raise your hand and I'll go ahead and unmute your audience.
Okay, so we will keep going, and I hope the audience keeps warming up as we go. I know it's a Saturday morning. It's also Eid, so Eid Mubarak to everyone who's celebrating. And I know we'll finish right during the lunchtime, so we'll try and wrap this up quickly so that you can go to your respective have biryanis. Very quickly, right? So there's a lot of data around us. There are a lot of techniques around it. And the thing with data is that you can, slice and dice it in any way you want, right? As the strip says, that you can add the data, subtract the data, multiply the data, but does the data make sense in terms of solving the problem that is at hand? And that is why we are here in this masterclass of Power of Data, Business Problem Framing through Analytics. And quick, just calibrating everyone into what to expect in this session. So first we'll go through, align ourselves on what is problem framing, why do we need it, when do we use it, and how to frame an effective problem statement, right? So that's very, very important. And we do a detailed course. We have a 12 to 15 hour course just on business problem framing, where we take use cases and go into the depths of each of the framework. But considering this is a master class, if there is anything that I want you to take away with, right, is how to frame an effective problem statement. What are the key components of framing an effective problem statement that will help you with the solutions and your clients, your stakeholders accepting the solutions. Then we will, there's no point in just keeping it theoretical, so we will practice it using different industry use cases. So we'll have retail, marketing, transportation, healthcare. So we'll have some use cases spread across these areas that we'll go through it together. And we'll end with a few recommended reads that I would encourage you guys to, go ahead, post this masterclass and go through them. Okay, all right. So moving on, we have a few comic strips around here. I like how they, consolidated a lot of statements into just a few lines over here. So there are different creative ways how we solve a problem, right? And there are different ways that we can solve a problem. Here it was that he wanted to keep his drink without holding it near him, and he didn't have anything. The quickest thing that he could find was his shoe as a cup holder. Now, did it solve his problem? Yes, it definitely did. But is it recommended? I don't know. Check his wife's expression. Our very famous man, Albert Einstein, said that if I have a problem to solve, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and only 5 minutes thinking about the solution. Why do you think he said this? Okay. Okay. We have understanding problem is important. Definitely, yes. And why is that? Why is understanding problem important? Very good. Maybe the solution of the problem lies in the problem itself. To understand the magnitude of the problem, we miss out on various aspects. If we jump into solution, very good answers, right? So we have a normal tendency to, if somebody gives us the problem statement, we immediately think about what are the solutions, approaches that we can apply, how can we solve it, how can we show it, how do we visualize it, how do we represent it. The problem with that is we think that we have made a great solution, but most of times we see that the end user for that solution is not very happy with it because they were expecting something else, right? Mismatched expectations, mismatched estimations. So a Harvard study across Harvard did a study across top companies, and 85% of their CXOs and top executives strongly agreed that their respective organizations were bad at problem diagnosis. These are the top organizations across the globe, and 85% of the executives agreed that their organizations are bad at problem diagnosis. And out of those 85%, 87% agreed that this flaw carried significant costs. Imagine you spent a lot of time in building a specific solution. You spend your time, you spend effort, you spend different types of resources, right? And if it doesn't see the light of the day, right? If the rubber doesn't hit the road for the solution, it doesn't solve all the problems, we have wasted a lot of our resources. So coming to, I hope we now understand why is it so important to frame the problem correctly. So what is problem framing? It is a design thinking method used to understand, define, and prioritize complex business problems. We'll talk about what is complex, how do you define priority, right? In the course of the masterclass. When do you use problem framing? Should we use it every single time for every brief that we are working on? No, it is a method. If you know the answer, if you know what the problem is, if you worked something in the past, go ahead and use your respective solution. This technique is used when the vision or the objective is not clearly articulated. You don't have all the facts with you. When traditional problem solving approaches do not work, so you have tried out everything, it is not helping you solve problems, and you need to figure out a better way to solve it. When you need to change directions of your analysis, right? When you need to discover and define, there was something done before that you're aware of. This is a completely blue sky project that you're working on, and you need to define the steps as you go forward. So this is a very useful in a situation like this. Also a situation where you have multiple stakeholders. Let's say you have somebody from finance who wants who doesn't have enough funding, who can't invest more than a certain amount, and who's going to restrict your solutions. But you also have a marketing stakeholder who wants to implement the best of the solutions, and probably it requires very high investments. I mean, you plan to put in an IT solution, right? But finance team is not ready. The sales team has their own conflicting priorities. So when you have multiple stakeholders across functions who come in with their own conflicting priorities, this is a good technique to use it to help resolve such issues. Okay. Why? When the scope is not clear, when the scope is very broad, it's ambiguous, and it's open to loose ends. It's very easy to get lost in a big scope, right? So if a company says that I want to increase my revenue by 10%, how do I do it? Right? So it's a broad scope. Like, how do you answer that? How do you go ahead and solve for it? When you have multiple levels of engagement and the value of outcome is not decided, right? So they want to understand different avenues to increase revenue. They want to understand different avenues to reduce cost, but they don't have a clear number to it, right? So this is where the problem framing comes in. Any questions so far? No questions, moving on. So let's define what we saw in the earlier slide in terms of complexity and discovery approach, right? So if the discovery approach, that means the technique of how do you solve for a particular problem is known, The complexity is also known. So this is something that is very simple. You've done it in the past. You know how to do it, right? You have a sense of the problem. You can categorize it to a specific category, and you know the response type. How do you respond? So in this type of a situation, work with your existing best practices. You are the owner. You know best. Go ahead and do it. For example, for new joiners, you have to build a report. There's a basic data extract that needs to be done. You know what are the data sources. You know all the KPIs. You have done it in the past. You can build a report from scratch, a very simple report which just states the performance of the business units or performance of all the sectors within your organization. You know what time frame it is. You know where to pull the data from and how to present it. It's a very simple problem. So you work with existing best practices. Now, let's say the complexity is unknown and the discovery approach is known, or vice versa, where you know the complexity. It's a very complex problem, or you can define the complexity in terms of simple, medium, or high, but you don't know how to work on it. You need to refine the techniques of how to go ahead and solve a problem. So in this case, again, you need to analyze, either the complexity level. So everything you need to flesh out what all goes into the problem statement, and you need to find out what all techniques will be applicable, and then you respond accordingly. If one of the factors is known and the other is unknown, you work with domain experts and SMEs to solve the problem. For example, let's say you've just gotten into consulting or a different domain. You were in FMCG, now you have completely moved into telecom. You know how to build classification model, right? You have worked on data analytics or advanced analytics, you know Python, you know all the techniques, but you don't understand the domain that much. You need to understand the intricacies of the telecom domain. Then you work with the respective domain experts or the SMEs in your team in order to build the solution. So here define X and Y axis. So we have just kept it. It can be either complexity or discovery approach. So either one, you can put it on X or Y. The point is that if both are known or if any one is unknown or known, how do you go ahead and do it, right? Okay. How do you define problem is simple? The problem is simple when you have done something in the past in terms of it's a known problem, right? Let's say you have to do a market basket analysis. You have done it in the past. You know exactly what parameter that goes in. Or let's say you have to find a problem, define a problem. Let's say in Six Sigma, you have to um, find efficiencies in the manufacturing line process. So if it's something that you've worked, you know exactly how the process is, you've worked on the process in and out, you know what is the right approach, which technique to put in. Is it non-value adds? Is it Six Sigma? Or for example, on the analytics side, if it is just a report build, if it is a classification problem that you're very familiar with, right? So just you need to forecast the sales for the next 5 years, you know all the parameter that goes in. It's a simple problem for you. Now the complexity level, right? If it is simple, medium, or high, it depends on individual to individual. What you might find to be very simple, right? You have worked on, let's say, you've been working on classification algorithms. You've been working on forecasting techniques. You've mastered it. But let's say for me, I'm entering into analytics. I have never worked on it. I've just done a theoretical course on the time series forecasting. I don't know how it is applied in real life. Then it becomes a complex solution for me. It's I know the theoretical solutions, but I don't know the functional aspects. So it becomes a complicated case, which is the second scenario over here. Right now, moving on, the third case, and we'll talk about this a lot more today is the complex case where both the complexity is unknown, the discovery approach is unknown. And we will go through some of the use case examples so that it's clearer for you to understand. Just focus on just think about your scenarios. What could be the problem statements when they come to you when you don't know how complex it is, right? Let's say somebody is asking you to build a pricing elasticity tool. You don't know what all factors will go in because you're new to this domain, right? You don't know what, and since you just done this analytics course or moved into analytics, you don't know what approaches, what techniques to apply, right? So how do you probe? How do you sense what the issues is, and how do you classify it in different segments? And therefore, how do you respond towards the solution? This brings around the complexity. Okay, give examples on known and unknown. Okay, known, like I said, known problem is a known complexity. Keep it very simple for the new joiners. Let's say you have been asked to build a basic report which shows the performance of a specific category. Let's say performance of detergent powders in the last 5 years. Okay, this is the problem statement. How did detergent powders in general perform in the last 5 years? If you know what data you need to pull, right? So you need to pull data from where does the data lie, right? If it's in one of the third-party sources, you have the data stored internally. You know how to access the database. You're familiar with SQL in terms of how do you extract the data, right? And how do you want to visualize it? The problem has been very clearly defined. Show it in a Power BI dashboard. So it's a very simple data extract that you need to work on. Unknown, for example, like I explained earlier, is you don't know. Now, if the question is, how do I improve my revenue from 5% to 10%? Right? So what organization I am, what is my current revenue? What are the challenges? I don't know. How do I solve for it? Can I solve using predictive analytics? Can I solve using descriptive analytics? Do I need Six Sigma for it? I don't know what is the technique I should apply, right? It can be approached through multiple ways of, there are different techniques present in order to improve the revenue from 5% to 10% for a specific organization. So here the complexity level is high. We don't know that the right approach is unknown. So this becomes an unknown case of the complexity, unknown case of discovery approach. I hope that is clear. Great. Okay, so we will talk more about this situation, the complex unknown metrics. There are 3 parts to it, right? The design principles, and this is a very important piece. So if everybody could, just focus on this one. The business context, the business impact, and the data. What is the business context to the problem that has been given to us? What is the impact that it's going to drive, our solution is going to drive? And what are the data that we need, what are the tools that we are going to use? So when we talk about business context, so problem categorization in terms of to the people who have worked on scenarios coming from a consulting background. So is it a cost optimization problem? Is it a revenue top line improvement problem? Right? Is it a problem of reducing the number of default cases in a banking environment? Is it a case of reducing the number of revisits to a hospital? Right? So can I categorize the problem, what kind of a problem it is, right? Does it have to be an optimization case, a revenue improvement case, or is it just an understanding of what is happening in the business? You need to do the context analysis, right? So if, let's say I am manufacturing company A, and I want to reduce or I want to improve my revenue for the next quarter to ensure that I'm keeping my investors happy. Now let's say I'm manufacturing A. I have a lot of I'm facing a lot of supply chain related problems, right, which is preventing me from meeting my revenue target. So I have supply chain issues, my products are not in store, and therefore I'm not able to sell them. Now the context analysis is, right, is this a problem specific to manufacturing company A, or is it, a situation like COVID when there was lockdown and there was global supply chain issues? So it's impacting all my competitors as well, right? If it's a global situation, how the way you will approach the solution will be a little different versus if it is just a manufacturing company A problem, then you will probably want to see who are my top competitors. If they're not facing the problem, then what are they doing things correctly, right? And if I'm manufacturing A, what is everything that I've been doing and what potentially is going wrong in that, right? So the context becomes very important here, and thereby doing your own research before jumping into research about the organization, research about the domain, research about the problem that has been brought to you before getting into the solutioning part of it. The next is business impact. So what is the success criteria? A very, very important understated point that I have seen across domains, across industry, is that we get a problem statement like, for example, I want to understand the customers or the demographics, do a customer segmentation in northern part of India. I want to introduce a new product, so I want to understand the customer demographics better over there, right? But what is the success criteria? How do you know, how do you define success? What the brand that you're preparing, have you already prepared? Have you already innovated that brand? Is it closer to launch? What type of demographics are you looking at? If it doesn't meet, if you don't see any of the demand coming in from North India, are you willing to explore everywhere else? So what is the success criteria, that you can define for a specific area of the project that we are going to undertake? Can we list them down and can we agree on them, right? So all the metrics, list down all the metrics, align it with your stakeholders. That brings into the stakeholders. Do you know who all your stakeholders are? Now, let's say you're doing a cost optimization exercise where you have to bring down the operating cost by a certain percentage. And you have to look at, all the functions across the organization, and you have to come up with solutions. Now, let's say if it influences you, the sales team, right? And your solution or your insights are going to impact how sales is going to perform next time onwards. Then the sales team, you need to get a sign off from the sales team. Otherwise, in paper, you can say that, hey, from now on, let's say if I am managing stores, I need to optimize the 1,000 stores that are operating across the organization, and every field rep who was servicing 10 stores earlier, now onwards will service 20 stores, for an example, right? But that field reps need align. If they don't align, then your solution remains to be on paper, right? So the field or the sales team becomes your stakeholders. If it's an IT transformation project that you're working on and you plan to bring in SAP or you plan to do automation for a specific process, right? Then the finance, the investment, the cost of procurement, the procurement team, they come in, right? So depending on where all your solution touches, who all are going to get influenced by your solution, they become your respective stakeholders as well, because they need to approve your solution. Otherwise, it just remains on paper. I have a question. May I know a little about the speaker? Okay, we'll take it up in a bit. Now, getting into the risks of the solution. So what happens if you have been told to optimize the cost, really bring down the operating costs, and you're looking at, so let's say your solution is a 1-year solution, okay, that we'll bring in IT transformation cases. We need to, make everything digitized. Automation will, bring down the cost by 5%. Then we are going to do X, Y, Z. And this implementation is a year-long implementation cycle. The risk of, there are different types of risks that you need to come in. The risk is if the solution doesn't, get a nod, what is it that you're going to do? If, let's say, in the next 1 year, you have said that, okay, I have worked on the solution piece, it's a 1-year term solution framework, but the stakeholder comes in and says that, hey, you're giving me 1 year, I'm going to die in the next 3 months, I'm going to completely go bankrupt. I need a short-term solution for now. So what are the risks? What are the constraints? Constraints, for example, are there any financial constraints? Are there any IT-related constraints? Are there any people-related constraints? So anything with respect to people, process, technology, you need to understand what are the constraints under each of these segments, right? Top line and bottom line impact. So the solution that you're bringing onto the table, does it have a top line impact? Is it going to help improve the revenue? Is it going to have an impact on the cost? Or are we looking at building the margin for a specific customer, right? Again, is it a long-term solution or a short-term solution that you're looking for? Like I said earlier, depending on, and these are the questions that you need to ask your stakeholders, your people who have given the project, that how soon do you want it, right? Or are you okay with, you also don't know, this is a new area for you. This is a new area for me. Can we do a quick context analysis? Let's see what everything is there. And can we come back and align on the time frame for the solution, time frame for us to work on the analysis? If you're aligned, then we will move into the solutioning phase. The last part is on the data and tools. So great, I have good business context. I have understood the business impact. What are the success criteria? Improving revenue. I have the stakeholders mapped. I have everything. They want a short-term solution, a 3-month solution, right? It's going to take us about 3 weeks to work on this problem and give them an answer. But what is also important is to figure out right at the beginning, if every data point that I need, do we have all the data in the organization? For example, if we want to do a forecasting, we think that, the company wants to see how much revenue it can make in the next 2 years with this new product. And you want to do a forecasting case. It's a new product, so you want to see and you're trying to forecast sales. So then you will have to think through what data points do you need, right? You need some data to forecast on. Is the data there in the organization? And in what form? What is the collection methodology? Is it lying in Excel, in broken files, in some manual scripts, across different formats? So some part of data is in Word, some is in Excel, some is in a SQL server or a specific DB, Access DB, which has not been touched or maintained. So we can't really talk about the data authenticity part of it, right? So these all become then constraints as to if, for example, you want to track a metrics of how the sentiment has been, right? And if you have not been capturing the sentiment and you're not storing this, the customer feedbacks anywhere, then you can't do a sentiment analysis on. So you need to first, then that becomes a new problem. So you need to first collect the data, customer feedback data, then you can run your sentiment analysis model on it, right? So which impacts the time frame of your analysis. Tool and resource availability. Now, let's say it's a big, massive project that you're working on. Again, sticking to the forecasting example, you need somebody, you need a tool, you need probably Python. This can't happen on Excel because you're looking at 5 years of very, very granular data. Let's say you need the right tool to do it and the right resource to work on it. Do you have a data engineer or a data scientist or an analytics practitioner, right? If you don't have them, then again, this impacts the overall governance, overall project time, right? Okay. So this is what we were talking about, the trade-off with respect to cost versus time. So any problem, again, what is the problem you're looking at? The complexity is unknown. The way we want to approach, the design approach is unknown. So we have to figure things out as we get along, to figure out the right metrics, figure out the right, if we have all the data, and to figure out if we know the right solution technique, right? So which has an impact on the cost of the project, cost of the solution versus time project and time to solution. So basis this, right? And the trade-off between these, what I mean by a trade-off is, you want a short-term solution in the next 3 months, but you don't have any underlying data. In order to collect data, we will take about 2 months of time, and only then, or in fact, a real use case we had seen is they wanted to see if a certain decision they made for a specific product was the right decision or not, a yes or no decision, right? So which is, people who know this, it's, you're classifying it as a yes or a no, a simple logistic regression problem where you say, okay, if it has worked, classify it as yes, or if it does not, make it a no. But what we saw was we didn't have enough data points. We only had 2 weeks of data. And then we had to go back to our stakeholders and say, hey, you know what, we can do this analysis. We know how to do it, but we have to wait for at least 12 to 20 weeks to collect the data to ensure that there is no noise in the data. So I can't give you the analysis, the answer now. It's too early. But I can give it to you when we have 12 weeks. Let's revisit this case after 12 weeks. And they were aligned with that, right? So that had an impact on the time, trade-off of the time of analysis or trying to answer that specific question. And all of this brought together is called the problem reframing part. You get a specific problem, and based on these 3 Venn diagrams, all the points that are mentioned here that we so far discussed, we need to sometimes go ahead and reframe the problem. And in this previous case that I was talking about, a product being newly launched, and they wanted to see if their strategy is working or not. And we couldn't say that, and we said that, hey, we need to wait for at least 12 weeks. What we then reframed the problem to be for the short-term solution was that, hey, I can't tell you if your strategy is completely working, yes or no, statistically right, until next 12 weeks. What I can keep doing is keep tracking the metrics for you, the key metrics in terms of, are we selling, how much are we selling, where all are we selling, and I can give you a descriptive answer. I can keep tracking those. So it will also help in terms of me getting my data points right for my analysis 12 weeks down the line, but also you to understand what is happening with that specific product, week on week. And that was a win-win situation. So they didn't say that, we didn't say that, hey, come back after 12 weeks. We then aligned, we reframed the problem saying that, hey, we'll just give you a report which gives a high-level metrics of everything that is happening with that specific product. And you stay informed, we'll do the analysis after 12 weeks. Any questions? This is very, very important to understand. It's very crucial before we move on. I'll pause for 30 seconds on this slide. Okay, moving on. 3 things you need to understand is it a top-down request coming in? So what are the success metrics that, for every level of our stakeholders that will help us quickly get a sign or sign off on the solution that we're making? Right? So there are gatekeepers. So how quickly can we convince the gatekeepers if we know our stakeholders? Are we already looking at data with biases, right? If somebody comes and tells you, hey, I know that there's some stores were shut in the last 20 days. Today is, let's say, Bakrid, and I know because of Bakrid and this month we had Easter and we had Ram Navami. There were a lot of holidays. Quite a few stores were shut in the, in India, and that's why the sales are low, right? So are we looking at data with that bias, or are we saying that, hey, let's look at the data through all the metrics and let's see if it is because the stores were shut that we were not selling, or is it because there is a pricing problem, there's a promotion problem, there's a problem with distribution or supply chain that's causing it, right? And the metrics in terms of what are the key metrics that we need to track or we need to work with. This is something that we need alignment on right at the beginning. What are my success metrics and what are the data metrics that I'm going to work with, right? Success metrics, because then, if you have aligned on what does success look like to a stakeholder and you have given them an approach, you get a sign off very quickly on that, right? And then you can decide, okay, this is where we stop the assignment. The data metrics, because you need to understand whether the data is there and in an usable format. Okay, how ChatGPT can be used to solve the business problem? Okay, can you be more specific about a business problem that you want ChatGPT to solve? And we will go through this and we'll take that question. So interesting question. How do you see ChatGPT to solve the problem? What type of problem do you want ChatGPT to solve? Okay. Now, these are different types of frameworks that are present that one can use for different types of situations, for different types of problems. We will not go through each of them. This is something that we take up during the business problem framing classes. But just to give you a perspective of, there's no one-stop all solution, that I have one framework and I can apply it everywhere. But depending on different situations, you tweak your framework that works, for that specific situation. For example, frame the problem as priorities, right? You have, let's say, there have been 10 list of problems by different stakeholders that has been given to you, or you can think of 10 different solution approaches. In your insights, you have found out the 10 different ways you can address a problem. But let me give you an example to this. Okay, I'm an e-commerce channel. I want to improve, again, my revenue. How do I go ahead and do it, right? So you come up with, okay, store these products, you improve, your CRM this way, you improve your, we'll do a sentiment analysis, we can do this, we can do X, we can do Y. There are 10 things that we can do. But working on a specific problem, right, takes time. Now, how do you prioritize it? So when you have a lot of different techniques that you want to apply, when you have a lot of different problems that have been given to you, we need to understand how do we prioritize among these and work in an agile format so that I can, keep giving the stakeholders some information, some insight at every point, rather than working on all of these 10 problem statements that have come from him that we give at the end of 3 months. No, so out of these 10 problems, and there are prioritization frameworks, like there's a 2x2 matrix or a bullseye diagramming, or there's a prioritization grid that we go in detail and we work with the stakeholder sometimes, or internally, if we have too many root causes, let's say, that we have identified that we want to look at and solve, then we work on the prioritization part of it, right? Then there are, if you're looking at building a new product from scratch, right? So you will look at journey maps, you will look at creating a day in the life of. So if I want to build an app that is going to help the field sales team sell more or sell better, right? So I need to look at how the day looks like and then factor those features in my product. So then it becomes the techniques that I will use will be the journey maps, day in the life, so on and so forth. There are many more that are listed over here, but we will go through in the next slide a very universal technique that you can apply at most of these kind of complex problems, right? Using the problem statement table. So here you list down any problem that you find to be complex that fits the prior criteria we discussed. What is the problem? Who does this affect? And if you don't know the answer, then these are the questions that you write to yourself, that these are the questions that I'm going to check, or I'm going to ask my stakeholder or do my analysis research on, right? So who does this affect? What is the impact, right? What is the impact in terms of cost, in terms of revenue, in terms of success criteria that I can define and quantify? What must be true to be successful? So what conditions, what assumptions are in there? What conditions need to be met? What are the dependencies and what are the constraints? So if for a problem statement, before getting into solving, we write, just a piece of paper or in a Word document, if you start writing these, then you will know what is the data that you have versus what is the data that you need to collect. And then who do you collect from or where do you get it from? Is this something that you can get it yourself by doing your own research, or is it something that you need to go ask a stakeholder for it? Now, if you know that you don't know where this data lies and you don't know whom to approach to, that's where you go and get into the stakeholder mapping part of it, which you see over here, right? Who's going to be my best friend from IT, who's going to help me get these data points, right? One of the easiest criteria to do that, to get things done, is defining a problem as in the SMART format, which is being specific, being measurable, being action oriented, or ensuring that the problem becomes achievable in terms of solvable, and it is relevant and time bound. What do we mean by this? Is when a problem statement is well defined and it expresses exactly what are you seeking to accomplish. We'll go through use cases, don't worry. Using action verbs to tell what you are planning to deliver, right? Very, very specific. Measurable. Goals need to be measurable. So we were talking about success metric, KPI. So what is the percentage? What is the number that we are planning to target? If we don't know, then at least how do we get there? How do we know that we have achieved? So we need some kind of a quantifiable number over here. It needs to be action oriented. So if you're looking at ways to solve for it, they need to be realistic solutions which factor in all the risk constraints, dependencies, and are achievable in a time-bound manner. They're relevant. The success metrics need to be relevant to your company or your stakeholder that you're working for. And that's how you will define action-oriented, the measurable part, and in a time-bound format. So time-bound is you define, is it a short term? When do you want it? Is it within a year, within 2 months, 2 weeks? You define it. Now, when you define all of these components, you get a reframed problem statement that now you and your stakeholders are aligned, are completely in sync, and can work in tandem. Okay. First, looking at examples of not so smart problem statements, right? If you get a problem statement like, hey, can you tell me ways to better manage the business? It's very generic. It doesn't suggest where, which part of the business, where is the greatest impact? How do we define, the management business? Are you talking about people? Are you talking about process? Are you talking about products? It's very, very generic. Not examples of being not measurable is, can you reverse a deteriorating performance, right? Without specifying what metrics reflect performance, you can't assess that whether it is, you're making any kind of improvement. Increase sales and decrease costs. This is a very common example that I've seen coming in, in briefs. Can you help us find ways to increase sales and decrease costs? We can do both, but sometimes you need to understand increasing sales might also lead to, at a certain threshold, might also mean more investments, right? Are we ready for that trade-off? Can we increase profits by raising prices? We have seen, at least in the FMCG industry, is that companies are increasing pricing of their products because of high supply chain, high raw material costs, high inflation, etc. But given that scenario, how do we increase profits? But then what are the constraints that you're putting in, right? I can't keep, if my cost increase, I can't keep increasing my suggested retail price just to increase the profit, right? And then not time bound. Eventually increase profits by 10% or increase profit 10% in the future, right? What is future to you? Future is tomorrow. Future is 5 years down the line. So then what is a smart problem statement looks like? Reduce business costs by 30% by October 1st by setting up an auto dimming lights in every room to turn off after 5 minutes of no movement. Now, if I have to break down this statement, it is specific because we're talking about reducing business costs. And it will be much better if we can define what business costs are, what components they come in our assumptions or in our document data. What do you mean by business costs? It's measurable because I want to reduce it by 30%. It's action oriented because I'm looking at a solution which will set up auto dimming lights. In this case, it is relevant because the top 3 is going to help. If I set up auto dim lights, it will reduce the business costs for my organization. The target for the organization is, to focus on cost optimization methods to reduce the overall costs of the entire manufacturing unit, right? And time bound is October 1st. A date would be nice, right? By October 1st of this year, or which year that you're planning. Any questions on this? Because after this, we will get into exercises where I'll ask you guys to work on them. I had given the caveat in the beginning, it's going to be an interactive session. So, so far the interaction has been passive. Now it's going to be very active. So any questions before we get into the exercises bit?
Audience, please feel free to raise your hand and go ahead and unmute yourself and ask questions to make it more interactive. If anybody has questions, please raise your hand.
Who are all involved in doing this? Great question. If I have understood it correct, you're saying that who's going to work on this, making it a, reframing the problem, right? Who, so obviously, if you are part of the team, so who is working on the solution? So the onus lies on you to give a right solution. So you need to ensure that, you are doing this exercise along with. Now, if it's a completely new domain, you want help. If it is not a group project, if it's a solo project that you're working on, so then you bring in experts within your team that you can work with. Let's say if it becomes a supply chain problem and you are just new to the organization, to the team. So if you can bring in some SMEs, people who have worked on similar problems in the past, can you form a working committee to look at this scenario to do this workshop? Feel free, depending on how involved your stakeholders want to be, right? Set up workshops to do this with your stakeholders, with the caveat that you have done your homework on the context and you have all the right questions that you want to ask them, to do this exercise with your stakeholders, right? With the working committee format with your stakeholders, whether internal or external, right? Involving them makes them feel being part of the process, makes them feel that they have given the solution, and that means that they can accept or they become the champions of your solution in their organizations, and then this gets to see the light of implementation, right? So who are all involved in doing this? You with any experts, domain experts, technology experts. Sometimes you need to bring in people from IT, from finance, depending on what type of a problem that you're working with. Good question. In the next exercises, we will discuss who should be involved in, solving those kind of problems. Give some examples of business statement. Yes, that is what the exercise is going to be. And let's move into that. Oops, sorry. So let's start with retail. A retail store wants to increase sales and customer loyalty by improving its product recommendations. Now, first exercise, is it in the SMART format? Yes or no? Is the statement in a SMART format? No. Great, Manish. Which elements are not in SMART? Okay, first tell me which ones are in SMART format. Is there any component of SMART that's mentioned here? Feel free to annotate as well. Customer loyalty, okay. So we have specific part of it which comes in terms of increasing sales and customer loyalty. Anything else? So we got the S part of it. What about M? Actionable is mentioned, very good, improving its product recommendations. No is for M, measurable, because we don't see a quantifiable number to it, right? So M is not there. Do you think it is relevant? So by relevant, I mean, would improving product recommendations improve sales and, customer loyalty? Is it relevant? Very good. And why is that, Satish? If you want to just unmute yourself and speak. Time is missing. Definitely, we don't see a time period over here. It's not time bound. Nothing about timing is mentioned. So it's very open-ended. Okay. So anybody wants to try it? Why do you say, is it not necessarily improving product recommendation will increase sales and customer loyalty? Okay, that is something that we need to test it out, right? Just by improving product recommendation, that we have to check if there is a correlation. If the correlation doesn't mean causation, right? So whether are there any other factors which is pulling down customer loyalty, right? Is it a problem with respect to customer service? Is it a problem with respect to anything else? By improving its product recommendations, if this is a brief that has come to you from the stakeholder, then please ask that why are you mentioning by improving the product recommendation? Is it a bias that you feel? Sometimes the stakeholders' response are, we feel that it is because our product recommendation engine is not optimized, it's not well, I think because it's the reason. But, is there data to support that? Right? Are you sure it's because of the product recommendations? Have you done a root cause analysis earlier? That to identify the sales or customer loyalty is down because the recommendation engine is not optimized. Could be perception issues. Absolutely, right? Just improving product recommendations won't help. So then this is where, how do you make this more actionable and recommendable? So if they say, no, we have done all the other analysis, right? And we think it is coming to product recommendation. Can we have access to that analysis? It'll help us understand what are the assumptions, considerations that have gone in, what are the data points that you've already looked at. Can we leverage that analysis into our following analysis? It's a good way to understand what has been done so far. It's very important to understand what has been done so far, right? Now, increasing sales and improving customer loyalty, right? It needs to be measurable. Any suggestions on how do we make it more measurable or time bound? How do we put in a time factor to this? Time factor to meet a defined KPIs, yes. Increase sales. So are we talking about increasing sales by, let's say, for whatever percent, by what time? Now, if they come in and say that, hey, is it because the appraisal for the stakeholder is due in the next 6 months, so they want to show some improvement in the next 6 months, and that's why the target is 6 months on a lighter note, right? Or what is a more realistic? Is it because yes, my investor meeting is going to come up? Definitely we are seeing a downward trend. How do we course correct? Or I have a buyer, my management has given a threshold or given a target that I need completely. So time frame is depending on what resource they deploy. Time frame is a factor of what is the end objective, and so why do you want to increase sales? Why do you want to improve customer loyalty? Yes, it's good to have, but why? Right? Increase sales to achieve what? Are you happy with 2% or are you happy with 5%? Are there any targets to it? Right? So that comes into the measurable factor. Identify ways that will help improve or meet the quarterly target of 12% growth, right? So Mr. Sanjay, you had mentioned maybe quarterly targets, absolutely fine, right? So is time frame for providing solution? No, time frame is by when do you see the result. So if it is for providing the solution, you will reframe the problem in a different way, right? Here, the problem statement, the premise of it lies in increasing sales and customer loyalty by improving its product recommendation. So you increase sales by a certain amount by this time, right? Increase sales by 5% for before Q3 of 2023. Any questions? So can we make an attempt to write it in a smart format? What do you think will be a right smart format? Put in your assumptions based on what we discussed. Okay, you're giving solution levers, but put it in the problem reframing appeal. Increase sales and loyalty, percentage of sales, percentage of repeat customer. Okay. And actionable, yes. So looking at all possible. Actionable would be something at understanding the drivers and drags for sales and customer loyalty, which could be in terms of promotion, advertising, market mix, etc. So these are a lot. If you need to stay to product recommendations, now there's a catch to it, right? If you're writing everything over here, you also, as a solution provider, as a person who's working on it, you need to understand whether you can provide all of these solutions or not, right? Whether you can bring in, do you have the expertise to bring in solutions with respect to driving promotional uplift or improving advertising mechanisms, right? Marketing mix, do you have the capability within your team to work on a market mix model? Right, this is in larger organizations or in consulting firms, this becomes a problem statement for the project managers as to who do they bring in the team to work on these type of solutions, right? But if you are just a one-man army and you're giving in all of these, right, levers that you can solve the problem of increasing sales or customer loyalty, then you need to understand or factor in the time that you're going to take to build these solutions. Now, if your time bound is the next quarter, right, which is, let's say, a 3-month period from now, a market mix model to perfect it will, if provided you have all the data and everything, right, and to test it out, you will take at least 4 weeks. given that you don't have any other priorities or any other projects under consideration. So these are some of the factors that you need to keep in mind when you are bringing in the leads. Now, all of these are valid points. If I have to choose promotion, advertising internally, I'll see where is if the data is there. If I have the skill set to quickly turn that around, and using the prioritization grid to prioritize all of this. So, having done a fishbone analysis, I understand the problem lies in promotion. It lies in advertisements, lies in the product recommendation engine. So we are going to do a market mix model. We are going to run a promotion mix model. Market mix model is going to take us, I'm just saying, 2 weeks, and this is something that we can earlier prioritize. This is all the background work before you come up with the statement that you align with, right? So, and through market mix models, I think though your sales target is, let's say, 15%, but how much of it can be achievable? This is the time frame that I need to look at. Actionable product plays, promotion, so all your 4Ps, etc. Great, but also think through in terms of the data, tool, and people availability to work on this solution. Okay, let's put this into practice into the next exercise, which is, okay. Now a time frame before I was expecting a question like this, but I haven't yet, but it's important that how much time does it go in order to frame a problem statement? It looks like just a 4-line problem statement, but a lot of work goes behind it, right? So you get a request from your stakeholder, you do your initial research on the context, you do your research on whether the data is available. With the stakeholders, you discuss on the success parameters. So all of the 3 Venn diagrams that we had seen, against each of the points, you make a list of everything that you have or you don't have. Then you come back and revisit a problem statement like this. Okay. So a retail store wants to increase, and this is the final reframing is once you have aligned with the stakeholder on the time frame, on the solution lever types, and if you're not sure, then you bring in that width away. So increase sales by at least 5%, and customer loyalty by understanding the drivers of decline, thereby recommending solutions around promotional mix, or if you're very sure it is drivers understand, or by understanding, or by showing the drivers of decline. You don't have enough time, you can't recommend it you can't do a full-fledged market mix model. So you say that, hey, we will stop the analysis here because you need it get done in 2 weeks and you're not being flexible around the time. We can't finish a market mix model in the 2 weeks. So we will stop. Our success metric is we will show you the exact drivers of decline, what is pulling down sales and by how much, and what can be done, right? So what are the potential solutions? So once you're open, we will take about 6 weeks to do a market mix model and give you the right set of insights. Then let's revisit the process around there, right? Or building a Oops, sorry. Something. By a certain Q3, Q4, 2023, whatever time frame you have aligned with your stakeholders. Any questions? We move to the next one. Okay, moving on. So what about this one? Is it in the smart format? No. Is it now in the smart format? Okay, what all is there? A hospital wants to reduce patient readmissions. So this is what? This is specific. By identifying key factors that contribute to readmissions. Here, they were a bit smart. They were not looking at only one. So they're not sure what are the factors. This is completely acceptable, and developing targeted interventions. This is fine. So here, S and A are there relevant. Also, we will see that, we're assuming here this is relevant to the entire premise of reducing patient readmissions is relevant to their overall, goal for the year, right? If I'm completely new, I've not worked in hospitality, but if you want to reduce patient readmissions, feel free to ask why. What is it going to lead to, till the time that you're convinced that, okay, reducing patient readmissions, what is it, and all of that. Now, measurable part, right? The hospital might come to you saying that, hey, we don't, our reporting mechanism is not very right. We don't know what is the patient readmission rate, or we have all the data, but we don't have anybody to work on and tell us what is the patient readmission rate. We're not capturing it as a metric anywhere. Can you help first understand, what is the readmission rate, and then we will align on how much do we want to reduce it by, right? And the reducing part of it is, again, what will reducing patients readmission lead to? Right? Is it profitability? Is it cost? Is it revenue? You need to extend it to understand. We understand reducing patient readmissions, but why? Always feel ask this question, why? Right? And time frame. So there might be a point where they'll say that, hey, this is something that we want to understand. It's a blue sky project for us. We don't have any time frame, right? So you put in the caveats of that the time frame is something that you will revisit once you have identified the key factors and once you know what are the patient readmissions rate is, right? So same smart scenario, same smart technique, but a different scenario where the customer needs to be informed first, which means that this exercise of problem framing and reframing is a continuous exercise, right? And it is not like you've reframed it once you're done. There are times that you might have to go do some analysis, go back, and then put the number to it. The important point is, as long as you remember that this is something that needs to be done or needs to be included or mentioned in your scope, right? They might be that we want to stop completely by understanding the patient readmission rate and the reasons, and we will come back as a separate exercise we will do to identify ways. That's also acceptable. Okay, but as long as you have factored that in your documentation with your stakeholder. Any questions? Great. Let's move to the next one. A bank wants to, how do you how to measure brand increase. What do you mean by brand increase? Are you talking about the brand equity? Are you talking about sales, brand image? So it has a lot of factors coming in, right? So you obviously have your sales, revenues, how is it being perceived, and how do you measure it? Is you run a sentiment analysis. Before that, you want to understand what is the brand equity in terms of you do run your market research, how much of what demographics you're targeting, and out of the demographics that you're targeting, are they aware of the brand, and what do you think of the brand? You can also look at in terms of your loyalty base. If you have the data, what is the penetration value, penetration in terms of testing this new brand out, and how much of that population has remained loyal, right? So what is the loyalty base, what is your repeat customers base to it, and overall the sentiment part of it. And then you to improve your brand image, then you bring in advertisement, your sponsorships, etc., etc. So those come in secondary. First, you need to understand the key metrics, which will be mostly around your loyalties, brand switching behaviors, right? You do a pricing elasticity model to see if you're going to increase the price, how elastic is our customer base. What happens if it goes out of stock, a product? Are people easily shifting to another brand, or are they going to wait? They're hardcore loyalists. Are they going to wait to your item getting stocked up and then buying it, not buying anything? It also depends on what category you are, right? You're playing at. Hope that answered your question. Okay. Banking. A bank wants to reduce the number of fraudulent transactions by identifying patterns of fraudulent behavior and developing algorithms to flag suspicious transactions. What do you think about this? T is missing, yes. But also, a bank wants to reduce the number of fraudulent transactions. And if you have people from analytics, or if you're going to do an analytics course, you will come across this concepts of alpha versus beta, right? Classification or a regression problem. So is this, you just want to reduce the number of fraudulent transaction, right? Here they're saying by identifying patterns of fraudulent behavior and developing algorithms to flag suspicious transactions. Now, suspicious transactions could be how many false positives, how many false negatives are acceptable, right? You can reduce the number of fraudulent transactions. What kind of transactions qualify as fraudulent? Yes, but all the things that you need to put those caveats in, understand, right? So then you will know which is it a classification problem or a regression problem that you're trying to solve. So that's going to help you as an analyst to work on later. So what is it important to them? Is it the number of fraudulent transactions? So if it is now, for example, 100 fraudulent transactions, it is more or less. We don't know. 100, if there are total 200 transactions, 50% transactions are fraudulent. It's definitely more, right? In banking, we don't accept that as a norm. That's different. I'm just giving you a very simple use case to understand. But 100 in terms of 100 million transactions, that's something that we should be fine with, right? Now, or that's a threshold that you need to understand and agree. Do you have the data? Have you looked at the data that way? Identifying patterns of fraudulent behavior. Now, I have developed an algorithm which is very, very stringent, which identifies even smallest, slightest hint of a fraud, which may lead to a false positive, right? But it's very strict. I'm not letting go anyone. Any slightest doubt, I'm going to highlight it as a fraudulent case. Now you have built a robust model. Your model scores are the best in the industry, the best model that you have built. Now think about the implementation. Based on your model that you have developed and you have handed over, there are some actionable insights that emerge out of it. For example, you have said that all transactions will be checked, and if there is any slightest of hint, the customer service representative will call up the card holder or the account holder to verify the transaction. Now imagine you're doing this for 100,000 transactions per minute. You are an HSBC or you're Citibank and somebody's calling every single, like you think that the customer has incorrectly entered the password once, you get a call. What is the cost of implementation of this entire exercise? Is it worth it? Right? Or are you going to say that no, call the customer if you see that the transaction amount is greater than 10,000 rupees for an international transaction, which, and something like this, the customer has not done any of these transactions the last 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever the threshold is, only then call the customer. Right? So your model is a little bit more flexible, which brings down the cost of the implementation part of it also. This is very important to understand from the stakeholder how stringent they want the model to be. Right? This is not something that you can decide by yourself. This is completely driven by your stakeholder. But the stakeholder needs to get educated. They will say, no, build me the best model. But when you take these scenarios to them saying that, hey, I'll give you the best model, but it's going to increase your implementation cost by 200%. Are you okay with it? Then they'll say, no, what's the best can I do? I can't, my business will throw me out if you improve the cost by so much. So these are the things that are important when you do conversations like this. Mind you have not yet gone into solving. You have not started working on your classification model or your regression model. This is building those scenarios to understand the trade-offs that are relevant to this specific use case for this specific process. Okay. So quick one, marketing agency wants to improve effectiveness of its online advertising campaigns. You will say, no, T is not there. There are factors in. Again, we understand that it's not fully in the smart format, but here I want you to write down what are the typical questions that you will ask your stakeholders, right? And I think Satish's point that he had mentioned earlier was, what type of people would you do this exercise with? Now, let's say you want to reframe this problem. What are the assumptions that you're going to make, or what are the questions that you would want to ask your stakeholder based on the statement that's made available to you? So write those down on the chat. Okay, so what factors are key factors? Okay, what kind of campaigns? Daily, seasonal? Yes. What's the budget? Very important question. What's the target that they are aiming perfect? Who are your customers? Do you have any age group when they will be free in a day to surf or typically surf? Right. So which would translate into So if they want to improve, so they have mentioned they want to improve the effectiveness of its online advertising campaigns. Now, what you can ask for in terms of data is that when you had started this, have you done any studies earlier, right? That has driven the current campaign structure, right? So what do you have any studies that we can have a quick access? So that will also help you understand what are the factors that they have looked into, and if there are any factors that they have missed, that you can always leverage, ask if they have done something similar in the past that you can have access to. That will give you the best context that you can need. In which platform that they want, yes, absolutely. So are you because that is linked to the cost, right? Depending on the platform they choose to advertise, linking back to the budget, absolutely. And how frequently do you want to run? What type of, is it a daily, seasonal, what kind of buyers there are, or what type of customers? Definitely. And if they don't have any answers, then you will have to factor in your time, saying that, hey, in order to give you the right strategy, right, we need to first understand the demographics, what are the relevant advertising options, what are the different, these are the different models that we can give you, but it's going to take us this much amount of time. And sometimes, most of the times, what we have seen is the stakeholders get very hooked on, right? That somebody is trying to help them get to that level of clarity of what is required to understand. So you're working as this as a practice. So good questions, everyone. So moving on, I think this will be the last exercise. A logistic company wants to optimize its delivery routes to reduce delivery time and cost by analyzing traffic patterns, weather data, and other relevant factors. Okay. What questions would you ask them, and what type of stakeholders would you? So one additional question. So what questions will you ask your stakeholders, and who do you think would be your typical stakeholders in this organization? Yes, Mohit, to your above point on social media platforms, everything should be target centric. And again, the target is something, if they're giving you a certain percentage, to understand why a percentage, why 10%, why not 5%, why not 15%, right? How did they come to a 10% number? Transport people, logistic, yes. Okay. Sanjay, I'll answer this question. So let me quickly get done with the topic and we can discuss on this question. I'll definitely share my thoughts on this. A logistic company wants to optimize its delivery. Okay, let's say it is perishable goods. That time, yes. So you're talking about dealers. You're looking at modes of delivery, reduce delivery time by what percentage? Yes. What is the current delivery time? What is the industry standard? If it's perishable goods, so it needs to be a faster delivery. This is route optimization problem. External factors, yes. So we have traffic patterns, weather data, and if there are any other relevant factors. Tracking is important. What if we have things in place, but the issues are drivers? So that is, a soft problem of, this is an interesting anecdote I have on this is what I've heard is that there was this case happened in Australia for a manufacturing firm, not the one that I work with, but a competitor, is that their truck used to be delayed, by few days, right? And there was once they saw, I mean, when they were doing this analysis post facto, that the certain stores were not delivered for 20 days, right? They were calling and creating problems, calling the drivers, and usually drivers of the field person. So local stores, you just have the driver's numbers. You don't have the head office numbers that you were talking to the driver ki delivery kab de rahe ho, right? Or the field guy ki saman kab aa raha hai. 20 days they've been raising this issue and there's nothing. This is a post factor analysis. The outcome of this analysis was, and this became a route optimization case, and how do we optimize and solve these problems? These stores have been going out of stock for a lot of this thing. So the problem seemed to be that the field representative for that area, and this is a very common problem in India and across, after all, we are humans, is that the field representative was not very happy with his appraisal, the amount, the incentives that he was getting. He had a tiff with his boss, and then what he did was, let's say he drove the truck with all the goods that he had from Bangalore to Delhi, and left the truck there. He was not attending to anybody's calls. He was very angry, and he just kept driving, and and it was a truck full of goods, and whatever goods he was getting, he was just distributing or selling it on the way to make some pocket money out of it. He left the truck in Delhi, and he ran away. So that was one. That was a unique problem that we saw in this case, right? So definitely, blockchain will help. Yes, if it's a blockchain problem, so great. So talking to understanding the supply chain, understanding the routes, and sometimes you might want to go through a specific route to see, how does a day in the life of a field driver looks like, right? Is the trucks optimized? Is it a truck that is causing a problem, like somebody said? Is the driver that causing a problem, or is the route has a lot of uh, stores that there was has a lot of traffic. You're stuck in Bangalore. You're stuck in Silk Road Junction for us together, right? So you're also talking about looking at the traffic weather data. So your stakeholders also include your IT team in terms of understanding how do you get this routing data in your the logistics teams, they will know the process, but the data is something that you might have to get from IT team, and in what form and fashion. And if you're a team of just consultants or analytics professionals and not data engineers, you will probably need some data engineering help to massage the data for you to run your route optimization problems. Yes. And definitely key factors somebody explained. So optimized delivery routes, analyzing traffic patterns, weather data, you see everything is perfect. There could be soft behaviors. It could be because of labor issues, labor laws, the political environment of that country influences on the specific, and if it's a problem faced by other manufacturers as well. Quickly moving into, so there are more practice cases that we will do in depth. We do case studies, just being a little cognizant of time. So just keep practicing as and when you can think of a specific problem that, think of any problems that you come across or a specific problem that you face. Is it in a smart format? What are the trade-offs that are involved? Who should be my stakeholders? What does success look like? And how do you define success, right? So think of these, keep thinking and keep practicing always. So there is a specific framework called the CRISP-TM framework, which stands for the Cross-Industry Standard Process for Data Mining, which is a cycle. So what we have done, right? So you understand the data. You start with business understanding. You understand the data. You prepare your data. You model the data. Right? Modeling not necessarily is restricted to analytical models, but if you're a Six Sigma expert or a process transformation, or you're driving a digital transformation journey, this can be applied there as well, right? So you understand the business problem, you understand what is the data. Based on the data availability, you go back and forth with business and align on the right metrics. Accordingly, you start working on the solution, you prepare the data, you model the data, you evaluate the solutions based on what findings you get over here during your evaluation phase. You go back to business and see if the problem statement needs to be reframed. For example, if we thought that it was the product optimization, or sorry, product recommendation engine was the problem, but you see that it is not driving you results, or giving you enough result that will meet the 15% sales criteria, right? Or your the fraud engine, right, the risk model that you have built in is not giving the desired results. So you need to relook at the thresholds. Then you go back, have a discussion with the business, realign on all the metrics. So, and then again, the process continues, you get into deployment. And then post deployment, you document and you track progress, right? Now, the documentation is very crucial at each and every step. A, because if there is any conflict, you can bring up the documentation. B, if you yourself are looking at it after a 3-month period, you know what you have done, what factors you have considered, so you will not spend a lot of time again revisiting every details of it, right? And this is a circle and that goes on. Now, details of it is here. Very quickly going through business understanding. We spoke about determining the business objectives, assessing the situations, determining the goals, and coming up with the project plan that makes sense to both you and your stakeholder. Understanding what is the data, explore the data, look at the data quality, then work on data preparation. So you select the data source, identify the data source, so SQL, how do I clean data, how do I construct my databases, do I need to do that, do I need to integrate data, and do I need to format data? You select your model techniques. In this case, I've given an example of modeling. And in analytics, modeling is really the fastest step. So this is the most classy, most jazzy part of the entire piece that you're working on, that I'm working on a random forest model, or I'm working on a deep learning model, but it is more or less models are just like, here you're building a regression model, is just one line of code. But the authenticity of the solution that you give is lying on the overall process around the modeling part. You evaluate results, you review process, you determine the next steps, and then you get into the deployment phase. Now, depending on how much of the process have you signed off with your stakeholder, you monitor and maintenance and course correct, or if not, you send out a final project plan. Right? Any questions on this? Okay. Book recommendations. So I have 3 recommendations that talk about this topic. Is Data Science for Business. So what do you need to know about data mining and data analytic thinking? It provides an overview of data mining process and how it can be used to solve business problems. This is very specific to data mining, but it also is a good guide as a starting guide to that talks about data preparation, because we're talking about data mining. Exploratory data analysis. So how do you come up with features, what type of features, what type of data to include, how do you include them, how do you clean them up, and a little on the predictive modeling, and how do you communicate the results. That's very important for any analytics case. The second one is data analysis and decision making. So it covers the entire analytics process from problem formulation to model development to implementation. So we looked at the CRISP-TM framework. So it talks about everything in detail. It's a very good book. It includes examples and case studies, real life examples from various industries, and provides hands-on practice with data analysis tools. So we do recommend it to people, even practitioners. We sometimes go back to see if there is anything that we can add on from this book. Third one is Analytics at Work, Smarter Decisions, Better Results. This gives a framework for using analytics to drive business results, including problem identification, data preparation, modeling, implementation, and communication. It also covers ethical and privacy consideration in analytics. Data ethics is very, very important. We don't emphasize enough on it. This is something, this book gives an additional flavor around if you're working on an analytical model, if you're working with data, so what type of data needs what type of privacy controls, what type of ethics measures need to be implemented. This is a very good reason. And here's a bonus book +1. Which is Storytelling with Data. This is for people who are under 5 years of experience, who are still part of this conversation. This book provides a framework for creating effective data visualization, communicating insights through storytelling. Now, what we have typically seen is not just newcomers, but even seasoned professionals, is that we see fancy graphs and we want to implement them. We see fancy charts, figures, we see nice looking visualizations, we try to build them. And if you're very good with tools like Tableau, Power BI, right, and other visualization tools, you can build great dashboards. But how complex is that dashboard? Is it telling the story the first hand? As an end consumer, am I able to consume the data, right? The data that you're showing in bar graphs, is it supposed to be in bar graphs? Is it supposed to be as bubble charts? You're showing them as bubble charts. Does it make sense to put data as bubble charts? These are very, very important factors we tend to, kind of miss as we start looking at, very attractive charts. Attractive charts are great, but what is important is the data. You can infer the data correctly and quickly, right? And your dashboard tells an interesting story the first time I look at it, not that somebody has to spend hours together to explain to me to understand each and every widget that's there in your dashboard. So this book is a very good example, which covers the principles of data visualizations and what type of charts to use where, and with what type of data. And with this, we end the session over here. I'll take in the last question that, my thoughts on ChatGPT. What the limited experience that I have with ChatGPT, and I'm kind of addicted to it. I try and build travel itineraries, look at maybe brush up, certain concept. So it's an important aid. Don't think of it as a threat, because tools like these will always be there. It will not vanish. How do we adapt to it, right? So people in the earlier days when there was no digital, right? Trades used to happen on paper. Then we moved into the digital phase. The roles got evolved. What's important is, right, while ChatGPT might have generic answers, you're not putting in your entire data set, or if there are tools, given the data ethics around, it will help ease out your work, but your work will then be, how do I ease the work for my stakeholder? Am I helping my stakeholder meet their goals, in a faster and a smarter and a more scalable manner? So that's where your true strength should be, and you becoming a domain expert in the area that you're working on. You understand the functional aspect really well. So that would be my key takeaway. you use ChatGPT to help your work and don't see it as a threat.
Thank you so much for those wonderful insights, Ms. Krishna Raha. This has been a wonderful session. Especially love the eye for detail, and thanks a lot for elaborating each of the topics very patiently for our audience here. If you have any more questions, we still have about 3 to 4 minutes to answer them. Please raise your hand or put it in the chat box. We'd be happy to take your questions later on as well, in case you probably are running out of time right now or not able to chit chat. You can save your questions and let us know later on, and we'd be happy to help you. Let me just quickly check if one more round of questions. Is there anybody else who would like to ask questions before we close for the morning? All right, I think we can go ahead and wrap up the session. Thanks again to the lovely audience for being here. This has been wonderful. Yes, it is definitely biryani time. Very happy Eid Mubarak to all of the ones celebrating today. Have a lovely, I would say, a day, and happy biryani.
Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Krishna Rao, for joining. We'd be happy to host you for another session. If you'd want to know more about the courses or more events like this, masterclasses, expert talks, Ask Me Anything sessions, panel discussions, how we did it sessions, a lot of more events that we organize at the Institute of Product Leadership, go ahead and visit the website, put it in the chat box as well for you to easily access. Follow us on @ProdLeader. You'll find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, pretty much every social media platform. You'll see us giving you notifications about the upcoming events and engagements. Thanks a lot. Until next time, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.